I am trying to read my entire physical TBR down to 0. To start out my reading my TBR down to 0 challenge for March, we are starting out strong with a rather large unhaul. The first book is The Holy Wild by 𝘃𝗫𝗫𝗀𝗫𝗀𝗫𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 want to say I got this book in 2020. Honestly, I missed the window to read this. I should have read this book in 2020 when I bought it. That is when this book would have made an impact on me. I did last night download the audiobook from my library and try to listen to like the first chapter while I was going to sleep last night. This wasn't speaking to me. It was really putting me off, honestly. What would have really touched me and hit me and given me so much value 4 years ago is not the same things that are going to give me value now. I have moved on from the content in this book and I don't want to read this. I was not enjoying what I was hearing. The next one is one that I recently picked up at a library book sale, not knowing that is actually the second book in a series. So this is The Pandora Room by Christopher Golden. I had no idea that this was a sequel. The first book in the series is called 𝘃𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗃, and I'm simply not interested in investing that level of energy so I can read this, okay? There's so many books on this shelf, you guys. Even with all of these unhauls, even now being, this is the 3rd month into this challenge, I still have 70 plus unread books on my shelf. Do I see myself reading this within the next year? Honestly, no, I do not, because I have too many other unreads that I have to get through to be able to devote the energy to read some other book before I can read this one next. Not even knowing if I'm going to enjoy that first one and finish that first one to be able to give the sequel a read. So this one is a very easy unhaul. The next book that I have decided to unhaul is The Future of Another Timeline by Anna Lee Newitz. I don't know what it is because on paper, I feel like this book sounds like something that I should give a try, but something about it, I keep having this thought in the back of my head like, ugh, I don't want to read that. I just don't want to read this. So there's other books on my shelf I would always pick up before I would ever choose to read this one. So I'm just gonna take this added pressure off my plate and check it off my list. I'm gonna unhaul it. The next book I have is Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is one, again, that I recently picked up at a library book sale, and I really wish that I had been a lot more intentional at that last library book sale. I bought so many books that day, and a lot of them have been books that I have been unhauling throughout this challenge. If I had given it more time, I would have filtered this book out of my bag and not taken it home with me, because I had just read another book from this author, which is Silver Nitrate, and I really disliked that one a lot. That book really put me off of reading other things from this author. I'm really not convinced that I'm going to enjoy this. I'm not convinced that I want to pick this up anytime soon, so it's going to be unhauled for now. The next one on my list is The Mad Woman Upstairs. I don't know a thing about it. The reason I picked it up is because it reminded me of Jane Eyre. I thought I would read this along with reading Jane Eyre, but I don't think I will read that one, Jane Eyre. I don't think I will read that this year because there's a lot of other classics that I need to read this year. I just don't think that one is going to be fit in, okay, because there's too many other things. So this will be unhauled because it will not be read within the next year. And the final book at this time I am going to be unhauling is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth. I did try to read this book at the end of last year, at the end of 2023. I tried to read this book in November, and I did end up getting like a couple chapters in. It's over 600 pages, and I don't want to read a book that is over 600 pages. I'm so sorry. I find myself really exhausted with these very long, chunky books. I very rarely get to the end of a book that is this long and feel fully satisfied like it needed to be that long. The majority of the time, I feel almost cheated. I didn't end up finishing this when I picked it up at the end of last year, and at this point I have very little desire to go back into it. And this is one of those books that has sat on my shelf for over a year at this point, and for that reason I don't need it in my physical space any longer. Like I said, it is only March 4th at this point. I do expect to continue trying to read some things from my shelf, so I will have other updates. I am going to include a little bit of a book haul in this video. Now, I'm going to be calling this a practical book haul because the majority of these books I have already read. I am not adding a ton of books to my physical TBR and pretty much sabotaging this challenge. Now, out of this entire stack, there is only 2 books that are unreads that will be adding onto my total here that we are going to have to try to read or unhaul within this year. So let's start with those and then we'll get into the rest of this little haul. The first one is Beware the Woman by Megan Abbott. I ended up finding this book at a Goodwill. I could not leave it there. Like, I know this is a newer release and I did have it saved to read it from my library. I had to take it home with me. So I am adding this one to my physical TBR, as well as I just picked up this book, Kill for Me, Kill for You. I ended up finding this book at a little free library. So this book was totally free, and when I seen on the back that this was a March 2024 book of the month, this literally just came out. It was free. I had never heard of this before, but I can tell it's a thriller, so I was totally 100% caught up in the deal, and I took it. I took it from the free library. The rest of these books are read. Now let's get into that little haul here. So the first one I have is Wintering by Katherine May. I did buy this book without first having read it, but I was really good and I read it right away. This book was speaking to me with some of the things I've been going through. I was really excited to read it. I knew that I wanted a physical copy to be able to annotate, and I really loved it. I rated it 5 stars, and I'm proud of myself because a lot of times I will buy books and they will sit on my shelf for years without being read. And that initial excitement that I had when I first bought it will slowly die away. But I did the thing that I should be doing, which is if I buy it, read it right away. So I did that with this one and I loved it. The next one I have here is Quit by Annie Duke. And this one I read in February, absolutely loved it, rated it 5 stars. Wanted a physical copy so I could annotate it. The next few books are actually similar to that one. So the next one is another nonfiction book called Sensitive. This is another one, recently read it. Absolutely loved it, 5 stars, and want to reread it so I can annotate it. Next one, same situation, okay? I am building my collection of nonfiction books. So this one is called The Perfection Trap, Embracing the Power of Good Enough. This book hit me so hard. I read this one in February, and I really truly think that this is gonna end up being a favorite book of the year. This is just like exactly what I needed at the time I read it. Again, I want to reread this. I want to annotate it. There's so much value that I got from this one, so I had to get myself a physical copy. The next book right here is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden. This was a book that I actually pre-ordered. Very similar to Wintering here, where I bought it before I had read it, before I knew if I was going to like it, but I actually read it right away. So I have since read this one. It only just came out in February, and I have read it, and I actually did a buddy read with one of my very best friends on here, Emily Good. I will leave Emily's channel linked in the description. We buddy read this together because we both read and absolutely loved Katherine Arden's The Bear and the Nightingale Winter Night trilogy. So we are both really excited to read this new release, and I don't regret buying it without having read it first because I knew I loved this author and wanted any book that she publishes, I want it on my shelf. So I was very excited to read this, and I'm glad I read it right away. Versus, I do have actually some books I pre-ordered in 2023 that I did not read right away that are still currently sitting unread on my shelf. Let me just give you a little example. These two were both pre-orders from last year because these are two of my all-time favorite authors. I have not read either of these. As well as Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. I didn't pre-order this, but I bought it in December. It has not been read yet, and I hate that. I hate that it's sitting there on my shelf unread. So I'm gonna do better going forward. I'm going to do more of what I did for this book. Buy it, read it right away, and knock it off my TBR. The next two books, actually, I ended up finding these at a consignment store that we have near us. I actually had a much larger stack in my hands at first, but I ended up putting back all the ones that I had not already read. So I was very strict with myself. I constantly have this challenge in my mind as I'm out and about in the world, not wanting to add books to my physical TBR because I know that I'm gonna have to read that book within the next couple of months. And here, that's so funny to say because if I'm not interested in reading the book within the next couple of months, why would I buy it then? Like, it just doesn't, it's like that collector mindset that sometimes comes in and takes over. And it's just about collecting the book over reading the book, you know? So I did end up buying two books that I have already read. So I picked up the London Seance Society and Kiss Her Once for Me. These were both books that I rated 4 stars, but I really loved both of them. I just talked about this one in a video. I initially had this one at a 5 because it busted me out of a reading slump at the time, and I really loved the ending. This one had such a huge emotional impact on me. I don't read a lot of romance, but this is one of those romance books that really, really hit me hard, and I loved it. So I was very happy to find the both of these. And the final little stack that I have right here, these are not books that are going to be counting towards my ultimate total. Okay, let me just show you what all of these are. So the first one is the other book that I ended up picking up from that day where we went to all the little free libraries, and it's this book right here called Mystery of the Witch's Bridge, and it's so cool. This is just totally the type of thing that I look for when I go to thrift stores or estate sales. I love little books like this, and I use books like this for display. I put them on my mantle or different places around my house because I love the look of them. I love the look of the aged pages, of the broken spine. It might sound super weird to you that I don't plan on reading this book, but think of it this way. I'm giving this book another life in my home. It's going to stay safe and dry and clean and preserved for my lifetime. Whereas I picked this book up in a little free library, and I can only imagine the other fates that may have been in store for a book like this. You know, sometimes books like this, they get thrown away, they get recycled, they get kept down in a basement and, you know, water damaged, moldy. So books like this, older books that are a bit out of date, this to me is decor, and it's beautiful, and I love looking at it, and it brings me joy. So yes. And then the next stack right here is a super exciting little haul of Agatha Christie books. So I found this seller on Pango Books. I love Pango. I buy the majority of my books I buy on Pango because I love buying them secondhand. I love supporting just, you know, another reader like myself. I found this seller on Pango who has a ton of older mystery books, and I was going through their collection of Agatha Christie books. I ended up buying quite a few of them. So some of these I have read, so let's start with those. The first one right here is The Mystery of the Blue Train, which is the 6th book in the Hercule Poirot series, and I have read this one. I love this. It's so cool, like these sprayed edges. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, and the next two are two of my very favorite Agatha Christie books, so I had to get these two. The first one right here is The ABC Murders. This book is so good. Such a standout Poirot book. I love when these older paperbacks have like the price on there, 50 cents. 50 cents. How is that possible? I can't imagine any book nowadays costing 50 cents. I love that classic cover. The next one I picked up here is Cards on the Table, which is another favorite. I love this one. And we have these really cool blue sprayed edges. This is a work of art. This is a display piece. I will not be reading or rereading these copies or editions because I want to preserve them as much as possible. They're already aging, they're already fragile, and I want to keep them in really good shape if I can. The next two are the two that I have not read yet, but I'm not counting them towards my total. So the first one is There Is a Tide, which is farther down in the 𝗃𝗶𝗴𝗴𝗲 series than I have gotten yet. Actually, this one is now renamed. It has a new title that it is published under, and it is After the Flood. And I did start this one, the audiobook of it, because I knew I was having this one coming to me in the mail, but I haven't finished it yet. So I have started it, and that one's really cool. I don't know if I showed that close, but we have the sprayed edges again, and I love it. And the next one is actually a 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗲. No, sorry. It's a 𝗁𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗀𝗃. And I didn't know that it was a 𝗁𝗵𝗶𝗃 book when I bought it. Currently, I am making my way through the 𝗁𝗶𝗴𝗃 series, and what I have decided is I want to finish and complete the full entire 𝗁𝗶𝗃 series before I move on to the others like the 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗃 or the 𝗁𝗵𝗶𝗃. So this book will not be getting read for a very long time because I still have quite a few 𝗁𝗶𝗃 books to go. But I love this little copy, and I love being able to add it to my collection. So that is my little practical book haul here. I'm so proud of myself because I was so tempted on several occasions to add more books to my physical TBR, but I was very intentional about the books I purchased. So with this whole entire haul, I'm only adding 2 unread books to my total here. So that's great. It could be a lot worse. We are really towards the end of March here. It's March 18th while I am filming this. This honestly has not been a great reading month for me because I think I've only read a total of 3 books at this point in time. So I really need to get a move on. I hope I will have another update for you guys, making my way through a few more books on my shelves here. Popping in here very briefly for a quick update. I have actually been going through my unreads and listing a lot of those books on my 𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗃 account. My reasoning behind listing a lot of these books is a lot of them have already sat on my shelves for over a year, and I figure if there's somebody else out there who wants that book right now and they have the intention that they want to read it, then okay, let me just go ahead and get it out there, and if it sells, if somebody wants it, I would rather them have it. Because yes, while I do want to read a lot of these, that book holding space on my shelf is at this point more of a burden than anything to me. I can always borrow that book from my library and read it when that time comes, when I do actually have the time for it. But right now, it's very stressful to have 70, 80, 90, 100 books on my shelf that I have not read. It's very stressful to me. So long story short, I have been listing a lot of my books on 𝗃𝗃𝗀𝗃. And so there has been 2 books that have recently sold. So the 2 books that I am unhauling is The Raven and the Reindeer by 𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗃. And by the way, these have already been shipped out to the people, so I don't have the physical copy anymore to show, but I will pop up a picture. 1, I love 𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃. 2, this is a retelling of The Snow Queen, and I absolutely love The Snow Queen. So I did have every intention of reading this book when I purchased it. However, I have recently hunted to try to find an audiobook version of this, and I do not think there is an audiobook that exists of this. So I'm very happy that somebody else is going to get the joy of reading this, because I know that without the audio, the likelihood of me actually ever reading this book was very, very, very slim. And the next book that I have recently unhauled is 𝗃𝗄𝗵𝗶𝗃, which was a collection, like a bind up of basically all the issues that was released in this series here, Hexed. And I never read this one. I was interested in it, but it has definitely sat on my shelf for over a year, which tells me I'm not that greatly interested in it. Not enough to pick it up within a year's time or anytime soon. And I have to say, one of the largest areas of stress on my shelves back here is the graphic novel area. And I have to find the actual time to sit down and read them. And a lot of times during the week, I just don't have that time in my schedule. So I am so glad that somebody else wanted this one and I am able to send that out to them. I feel like a tremendous weight being lifted off my shoulders every time one of these books gets read or DNF'd or unhauled. Pressure off my back, you know, time I can allocate to other things. I am here to check in with you guys for my final update of this video. I did decide to tackle my large collection of the newer Buffy the Vampire Slayer comics. These started being released in 2019 and they are more of a reimagining of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer that we know from the TV show. So let's see, I have the entire run of this series. So there is 10 volumes and then there's 2 little extras. So we have one that is Willow's story and then we have one which is a Buffy plus Angel event, they call it. And one of my gripes with this series, let's start with my gripes, because spoiler, I am actually going to be unhauling this entire run of graphic novels. Let's get into why. I'll get into the ones I read. So I read volumes 1 through 4, and then I read both of these little additionals, the event and the Willow one. There's so much about this series that I feel like didn't make sense, wasn't fully explained, details felt like they were left out, felt like I was reading things in and out of order. So I always felt like I was on a different page than the story. Actually, the very first one I read when I started this was the Willow one. And I was very confused, very thrown off, because this takes place like halfway through this run and it just doesn't make sense. I don't get why these two right here are divided out into their own copies and the issues that are held within here are not put in order into this. Like, it makes for a very confusing reading experience. So I got through a total of 6 of these volumes. Volumes 5 through 10, I did not read, and I am DNFing this series after the 6 volumes that I ended up getting through, because I just there's a lot of critique of this whole series. The general consensus of what I've seen is that nobody likes this series. If you guys are Buffy fans, there is also the Buffy graphic novels that are a continuation of the show. So the show ends at season 7. The storyline picks back up in graphic novel form. So this set right here is season 8. There's season 9. I think it goes to season 10. It might even go beyond that, but I only have up until season 8. These are amazing. The art is phenomenal. I believe the consensus is that these are well loved. I love it. And I have not read all of them, but the first volume, I have loved this since I was a teenager in high school, and it meant so much to me. The artwork is phenomenal. So I had high expectations for this new series. Different artists work throughout this entire series, so it's not like a consistent one that worked the entire time, so maybe that's part of the issue. But something I noticed is there was a really high quality of the artwork in volume 1, and there's like a steep drop off that just continued to go downhill, and the art styles, the artwork just got worse and worse and worse. And okay, so that's the thing with having multiple different artists working on all these different volumes and issues, and there's no consistency. Let me see if I can show you up close, but I want to show you some of the inconsistencies. So now look right here. So this is Giles, Buffy's watcher. And so this is volume 4 of this run. Now I'm going to go right to volume 5 and show you now what Giles looks like and the art style now. So if you can see, I mean, that is a very stark difference, like completely different, and it takes you out of the story. The real reason why I am DNFing it is because I just got to a point where it felt pointless. There's so much fluff that is packed into these volumes. It's like they are drawing out the storyline in a way that is not needed. Take, for instance, this Willow volume. Like, this was the most unnecessary thing I have ever read. It adds nothing to the story. Unless you are after a very easy, cozy read, then sure, this makes sense for that. But if you're looking for a really well done story, this is not where you need to go. That bothered me that so many things did not make sense, did not really feel fully explained. There would be like a plot point that we were following, and then I feel like it would just drop off. Honestly, it feels like a waste of my time to continue the series. It feels pointless, it feels meandering, it feels like it's not going anywhere. I did go and read Goodreads reviews of the final 6 volumes that I'm giving up on. The reviews were so bad. I know I am not missing out on anything by DNFing this series, as well as like the final volume, volume 10, reading people's reviews. It was like a consensus across the board. Everybody was rating this volume 1 star. Nobody seemed to like it. Everybody was saying how pointless it was. I'm not going to continue investing myself further into a series that ends up leading nowhere, you know? So this was a very large chunk of my physical TBR, because going into this year, the only one of these that was actually read was volume 1. The rest of these was all unread. So this is a huge win for me for this challenge, because that is 11 books I get to knock out and check off for this challenge. So let's go ahead and look at my total here now. Okay, so as of the end of March, because this is my, final update for March, my total for my physical TBR is 60 books. It does make me feel a little bit overwhelmed, because that's still a lot. That is still a lot of books to read in a matter of, at this point, 8 months. Yeah, 60 books in 8 months. Not that I'm gonna end up reading them all cover to cover. There's gonna be more that get unhauled, but it is overwhelming still. However, I have to think of the positives. I have to look at how much I've already accomplished so far. And starting out with 111 books, my total's down to 60. That means that I have been able to get through a total of 51 books checked off of my physical TBR. I know I've talked about this before, but before I started this challenge and embarked on this journey, I really was not reading any books at all from my own personal library, while at the same time I was still continuing to collect books and add books to my physical TBR, not with the intention that I was never going to read them, but something about it, I was never drawn to them. It's like once I acquired that physical possession, it totally took any motivation that I had to read the book away. I don't know why. I don't know why that is, but this challenge has really, forced me to acknowledge what I have collected and put that time and energy into reading it, the same time and energy that I took into collecting it, I'm learning a lot from this process. I am rephrasing a lot of these thought patterns that I've had about why am I buying, why am I collecting, what is this for, what am I gaining from collecting books that I have not read before and having them sit behind me, never read. So I'm so happy I'm doing this. I'm so happy I'm continuing to learn more about myself, more about my habits, and yeah, we have 60 books left. And I will see you guys in April for the next update of this challenge. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.